Okay, again, I want to thank you for joining us for today's live webinar entitled Realizing the Potential of Artificial Intelligence and Machine Learning to Achieve Next Level Vigilance and Safety. My name is Kevin Miller. I'm your host for today, and we're going to take you through a couple of quick introductory slides and then bring our speaker on for the session. We can go to the next slide, Alan. So before we get into the actual presentation materials, I want to take a moment and tell you a little bit about Astrix and who we are, why we're presenting this content on the market today. And then I'll introduce our speaker and we'll hand it off to their capable hands. So for about 25 years or so, the breadth and highly specialized services, processes, and technology has enabled Astrix to be a leading partner in transforming the ways that science-based businesses succeed. That's our mission, and that's a kind of a high-level statement about who we are and what we do in the industry. Some fast facts about us: we were established in 1995, and our vendor and platform agnostic, meaning as a company, we work with lots of different technology platforms. We don't align ourselves with any particular vendor. We work with many, and we work closely with our customers to make sure that they're choosing the systems that are right for them and their individual needs. We are located in the United States. We have offices overseas and have about 1,200 employees. The really interesting thing we always like to point out is that greater than 90% of our team members hold some kind of an advanced science degree. We are a science-based business. We are a business that is staffed by scientists who help other scientists. Our headquarters are in beautiful Red Bank, New Jersey, and the type of clients that we're helping are those in the obvious places: pharmaceuticals, life sciences, chemicals, CPG. We also do work in government agencies as well as research institutions. A little bit about the services. We can go to the next slide, Alan. A little bit about the total scope of services that we bring to bear. We like to say that we support the continuum of scientific operations and data management. And that includes everything from at the very beginning of this process, if you want to look at linearly, we help with strategic innovation and roadmaps. We help with enterprise architecture. This is really where we're really kind of helping a company define where they want to go from a technology standpoint and how to get there. And then what is the baseline architecture that they'll need in order to get there. From there, we work on data governance and data management. This helps our clients implement strategies or methods or even frameworks that's going to maximize the value of their digital assets. It also helps ensure data integrity. Then we get into things like business analysis, and that's making sure that you have the right people and processes and technologies lined up to be successful. From there, it could be helping you select the right solutions and software. From there, it could be helping you develop, implement, and validate those very solutions that we help you choose. And to round it out, we also have capabilities in staffing. So we can help staff not only people to help run, manage, and maintain these systems for you, but even just science-based personnel. We can help staff your laboratory or your R&D department. So that's a little bit about the breadth of services that we bring to bear. I'd like to, now we'll kind of switch gears and introduce our speaker. We can go to the next slide. And so Alan Sommer is our Vice President of Pharmacovigilance Delivery Services, and he brings with him 20 years experience throughout all phases of product development. He's led the services division for several pharmacovigilance software vendors and consulting firms, and he's very passionate about ensuring that client PV systems are both efficient and effective. So we're pleased to have Alan with us, and I'm pleased to have an opportunity to work with him again in another live webinar. Alan, I'll pass to you, and I'll come back on at the end and help with questions.
Sure. Thanks a lot. I appreciate it. So today, we'll talk about artificial intelligence, ML, and some of the other technologies that's used in pharmacovigilance. If we think about artificial intelligence, it's been around for decades, right? And I remember when I was a kid, I loved the Jetsons, right? That was like my show, and I thought it was just so cool how they had cars that could fly and machines that could make food out of air. But the one that I loved the most was Rosie, right? If you remember Rosie from the Jetsons, and I remember even asking my mom if we could get a Rosie. But the cool part with artificial intelligence and where it is today is Rosie is actually real even today. There are robots out there that can clean your house, they can get you coffee, they can do all sorts of household chores. They may cost, like a family vacation of 4 to Italy or something, so they're not inexpensive, and they're not exactly Rosie, but they are getting much closer to some of the things that were in the Jetsons. And so it's pretty cool how we've advanced and how we use artificial intelligence today. Some of the ways that we do use artificial intelligence, and it's all around us. so many companies are using it. They use it to improve our lives, gain efficiencies within the workplace, and of course, increase their bottom lines and their profits. Right? We all use them at times as well, right? Such as our voice-activated assistance devices, right? The Alexa and so forth. Speech-to-text conversion, right? When we talk into our cell phones and it converts our speech to text. Facial recognition. And there's also a lot of other examples that aren't maybe quite as common, right? When we do banking and deposit our checks over the phone, even today in the mortgage field, when you're doing your applications, they're analyzing using AI as to whether or not you're a good lender, some of these companies, and they're moving in that direction. And even AI was in the news recently in a couple of ways, right? I don't know if anyone saw recently in the New York Times, there is an article about how this AI generated art won first place in this art competition. Of course, many other people weren't happy about that once they found out that it was AI generated. But the computer that drew the diagram, they looked back at old paintings, figuring out what people liked and was appealing to them, and came up with its own design and composition. The other one that was just recently in the news, and it was just yesterday, I saw how one of the grandmasters in chess accused another person of cheating. And his accusation is that they're using a computer in the background that uses AI, and then using some kind of code to get back to the person as to the right move. And that's because the AI programs that use chess and checkers, on average, I think they say that it will beat a grandmaster, the best person in chess, 99.98 or 97% of the time. So you can see it's come a long way. It's all around us, and now the pharmacovigilance space is using it, and we'll talk more about that. Now, when we talk about artificial intelligence, the way that I like to think about it from a definition perspective, it's really just, when computers are able to do things, when computers are able to do things that typically require human intelligence, right? And it really can cover a wide gambit. And the key is, of course, is when computers do it, they have to do it as well or better than humans, right? Because, of course, if the computers aren't doing as good a job, then we'll probably continue to do it with humans. And there's AI is a very encompassing term of a technology that's used, and there's a lot of subcategories within the AI. And we're not going to spend time talking about all of them, but there are three that are being used commonly within the PV space, and make reference on today's call. And the three is, machine learning, which is basically when computers have the ability to learn using algorithms without being explicitly programmed, right? So, for example, I've seen where companies are predicting a person's weight based off of their height and their birth date, their location, a bunch of other things. And through this algorithm and through the learning, they're starting to predict weights and if there's inaccuracies. Deep learning is a subset of machine learning. And deep learning is when we kind of take ML to the next level. It's effectively teaching computers to do what humans naturally do. It needs a lot more data. It uses a different level of algorithms. Examples of this is when your speech to text translation, as well as like facial recognition, or if we look at it from a PV perspective, I could see it using for X-ray recognition, right? Once again, something that humans can do that takes a much deeper experience and knowledge. Now, natural language processing, NLP, that's where we're doing text recognition. So things like that are language translation and the free text when you have unstructured data. and pulling out data from that unstructured data to structured fields is a form of NLP. Now, how do we measure artificial intelligence really from an ML perspective, right? Are my algorithms working? Can I trust them, right? And the common method that is used is what's called an F1 score. And in that F1 score, it's evaluated from 0 to 1, 1 being the highest you can get, meaning that it's 100% accurate in a sense, okay? And F1 combines two typically competing metrics, which is precision and recall, which we'll talk a little bit about. So that can be a little confusing with the F1 scores, but the way to think about it is what they call a 2x2 binary confusion matrix. And it's supposed to unconfuse things, this matrix. And this is where you have predicted values, what you're expecting to get, versus the actual values. So if you're expecting something to be positive or a particular value, did you get that value? And the same thing for negative. Something we're hearing a lot in today's society, right? Especially with the COVID tests, those rapid tests where you have false positives and false negatives and so forth. And if we look at another example, which maybe clarify this grid a little bit, is a true positive is where a woman goes into the doctor's office, the doctor says you're pregnant, and lo and behold, she's actually pregnant, and so forth. A false positive is, simple example is where a guy goes into the doctor's office, the doctor tells him that he's pregnant, and of course he's actually not pregnant. A false negative is once again where a woman goes into the doctor's office, the doctor says you're not pregnant, but in actuality the woman is pregnant and the doctor must have missed something. And then the last is a true negative, which means that the doctor says you're not pregnant, and you're actually not pregnant. And so this little grid is going to be very important when we talk about ML and the accuracy of ML when we look at the precision and recall. And we talk about precision, it's basically of all of your positive observations, the predicted observations, how many of them were actually positive. So that tells you what your precision is. Once again, ideally, your precision would be equal to 1. So every time that you said something should be positive, it actually is positive. Okay. Where recall is how many positives you have, how many predicted positives you have over the actual positive observations. So that's your true positives and your false negatives, which are actually positive. And this, once again, ideally would be a score of 1. And this is giving you the idea that you're able to recall and you can trust your information. And then on top of that, if these formulas weren't enough, is how you calculate the F1 score is the formula that you see here. And for people that are math enthusiasts, you're more than welcome to evaluate this, and there's a lot more literature out there. But the key is that the F1 score ideally would be 1. Now, in reality, it's almost never 1. Especially in the PV world, from what I've seen, I've never seen it 1. But you want to try to get it as close to 1. Typically I've seen where your F1 scores, a good F1 score is in the 80s percent, a 0.8 or 80% F1 score. And when you based on that F1 score, you then have to look at the underlying precision and recall and make adjustments, right? And you'll find that lots of times when you increase the precision, the recall goes down, or vice versa. And so maybe based on your formula, based on the field, one is more important than the other, right? And it's not one shoe fits all type of thing. But the F1 score is important. You want to try to get your F1 score as high as possible, and that will allow you to feel that your data is trustworthy. Before we talk about into how AI is used within the PV space, I just figured give you a little fun fact about AI. So the first AI program that was ever written was by a fellow by the name of Chris Strachey out of England. Back in 1951, he wrote a checkers program, and by 1952, the program, based on its learnings and the algorithms that he was able to put into it, was able to complete a game of checkers and at a reasonable speed, and was competitive. So AI has been out there for quite a long time, and Mr. Strachey is given the credit on his little Ferranti Mark I to develop this program, which is about the size of a desk. So now if we look at the PV space, AI ML has been a term that's been out there probably for the last 5 to 7 years, I guess, where companies have been talking about it. And it's a reality now. The last couple of years, maybe a year or so, companies are really using AI ML when they're evaluating their systems and looking for the future direction. It's one of the key things. And the reasons why is, we're seeing an increase in the drug approvals that are happening, and they're happening even more frequent. So we're getting more drugs approved. As we all know, in the world, our population is growing. We're living longer. People are having more children at times. And as you live longer and have a greater population, more people are taking your drugs. Therefore, there's more potential reactions to your medicines that people are taking. We're also seeing a huge increase in digital data. And so while this is not specific to PV, but in just general from what Google, IBM are seeing, the amount of digital data is tremendous. As you can see, it's growing exponentially. And that's because of the computers, the technology out there, forums, and so forth, that people are exchanging data. And the key is, with this digital data, is there's a big increase in the unstructured data, which are the blue lines, versus the green line, which is the structured. You can see the structured data is growing, but it's really the unstructured data. And we talk about unstructured data. Once again, those are your emails that are coming in, your social media, things that aren't part of your standard form that you can just easily read, or a computer can read. So the fact that unstructured data is coming in, and that data takes a lot more time for an individual to go through and pull out the case data and information that they're looking for. And so all of this in general, as we've seen and we know in the PV space, is causing an increase in the volume of AEs that this is a chart of just the FDA, but every government agency, every company is seeing a significant increase in the volume of AEs that they're seeing. The number I've been, that I've seen in industry is that the volume of AEs is increasing about 15 to 20% per year, depending on the company, products, and so forth. And unfortunately, the budgets aren't increasing correspondingly, right? You're not adding 15 to 20% to your staff year over year to keep up with these volumes of AE. So we need to look at other alternatives. And so companies are looking at AI and ML and other technologies to help deal with this influx of cases, and not only deal with the volume, but to do them more efficiently as well, right? Which will help revenue, help and get more accurate data, and help the world as a whole. And so how is AI being used today to help within the ML to help within the PV space and the kind of the case workflow. There's a couple of ways that are being used today, as well as some areas that are being looked at and evaluated and tested, and we'll talk about a few of those. If we look at the first step of a typical case workflow, is you have your case intake. And this is a big area that a lot of companies are focused on, and that's because they say the processing time to process an entire case from end to end, I think it's about 40%, right, give or take some, of the time is spent just on case intake, right? Whether it's reading your forms, most likely getting unstructured data, emails, so forth. So a lot of time is being spent on case intake, and the reason why is there's a lot of things that AI can help with the case intake. The primary one being the extraction of data from whether it's structured, unstructured data, right? Emails that have text with attached documents, looking at social media, literature is another key area that's being used within case intake, where AI is being used from a literature perspective, where it will help companies, one, to identify which literature articles are of interest and may be applicable for their products and market that they're looking at. But most importantly, it also can read through those literature cases, identify the key number of AEs that are in that literature, pull out and create cases for each of the individual patients or, that are involved within that literature article, and pull out the key information associated to that person. So you can see how that would be a tremendous help, as literature articles, can sometimes have 10 to 100 people mentioned within a literature article, and the ability to just be able to parse out and create cases based on a particular literature article would be a big time savings. Once all that data elements are out, then you're able, the algorithms are also to tell you whether or not you have a valid case. Do you have the 4 elements? It'll classify it for you, prioritize it for you. You can even translate documentation, so that if you're getting documents that are not in English, it will help translate them to English, and once again, extract those data elements and help create the cases and allow to gain those efficiencies. Now, this isn't 100% to, replace people, right? As I said, we're not getting F1 scores of 1 all the time. So there still needs to be human intervention here in case intake. But once again, this will help augment and really reduce the time. And what I like to say is focus your team and your people to the key areas that really needs their focus. The next phase of case workflow, just looking at a very high level, is kind of the case processing. After we've taken the data in, processing that data, and some of the ways that AI is helping with this is it's streamlining your MEDRA coding, it's standardizing your inputs for your case processing, and most importantly, I find that the data quality is tremendously improved, right? When extracting that data, when looking at data, hospitalized is only spelled one way. It's not spelled 15 different ways within your system. So you're getting better data quality, better standards, which of course help you with your signaling and other downstream type of interactions you have. One of the other areas that a lot of companies are researching, I'll say, it's not really in use today with AI/ML. There's some companies that are testing it, is being able to look at case causality, right? It's a very tricky thing, as we know, to be able to determine case causality, and there needs sometimes to be some medical insight into determining that. But the algorithms are getting a lot better, and as more and more data goes into these algorithms, the machine is learning and getting a lot better at it. And so companies are becoming much more hopeful that the case causality, which is one of the more challenging ones, will be able to be done in the very near time frame. And some companies are getting very good at it. The other area is if we look at just case reporting. So there's a few ways that case reporting companies are using AI ML. One of those is the automated reporting. When I say automated reporting, I'm not talking about just the the standard rules that systems have today, and based on the rules report the case. The systems are learning that more based on the case data, should this case be reported to which of the companies? Is there some, as we all know, the rules aren't 100%, and there's always extraordinary circumstances as to when cases need to be reported. And with AI and the way that it's learning and the more data that you put through it, it's getting really good at figuring out where cases, what agencies, what partners cases need to be reported to. The other area, which is once again not being done today, but companies are evaluating it and looking at it, and I think there's a lot of promise, and I think it would be a tremendous asset to the industry, is being able to look at the RSI, your reference safety information, whether it's your brochures, your product inserts, all that literature that periodically gets updated and impacts your labels and causality and other things. Just like literature where AI/ML can go through and pull out data, the same thing can be done on your RSI data, where AI can be used, look for changes within your literature, what's the impact to your existing systems and existing cases. So there's a lot of promise in that. And while I haven't seen any companies doing it today, I know there's been some discussions about it. So I'm hopeful for that as well. Another area that, and then if we look at all of this, another area is, the term that we've heard is the touchless workflow, right? Which means that basically from a case coming in to a case coming out, no one needs to see it. And this is, the holy grail. And there are companies that are doing touchless workflow in very certain circumstances, I'll say. And those circumstances are where, the product is a very low risk product, 99% non-serious type of cases. The product's been out there for quite a while, so they don't get a lot of unexpected types of cases. And so those type of cases, they're able to push through their workflow in what they call a touchless mode. Now, of course, if there's some, when the system processes the case, if the F1 scores are very low or other values are very low, it pulls that case out for human intervention. But a large majority of those cases under those circumstances are going out without being seen by a human eye. So that's a very key and, kind of the holy grail that everyone would love to get to, is where a large majority of your cases can be touchless, and only the ones that have a potential risk, based on the computer's evaluation of it, then gets a human intervention. The other area that AI is being used today and being tested out is in regards to signal detection. As we know, it's a very manual process today. It takes a lot of time to do that data mining and, manually looking through all of that data, using the tools and reports that people have to even identify a potential signal. So AI is being used today in a great way, where AI, ML, and so forth are really good at is taking large amounts of data and evaluating it and predicting what's from it. And so companies today are feeding in all this data, and what's coming out is potential signals, which are then evaluated by humans. But just being able to identify those potential signals has great value. And there's talks about once we have a potential signal, and then it could get put back into your case safety system, and maybe a new case comes in and it meets the potential criteria for a new signal. Once again, algorithms can identify that, flag that, notify people that a new case came in that is part of a signal that's being evaluated and so forth. So there's a lot of promise in this. Once again, because it's a very manual process that takes a lot of data to be able to go through, which is exactly what AI technology is great at. So we've talked about what AI is. We've talked about why PV is looking and using AI, how it's being used within the PV realm and some of the safety systems. And what I'd like to part with is just kind of what would be my recommended next steps for companies, whether they're using AI or thinking about AI. Is first is just to assess your current system and the marketplace, right? We don't change systems very often, right? It's every 7 to maybe 10 years you switch systems, right? And, there's lots of upgrades that occur in that time frame, but it's usually about 7 or 10 years that companies will feel like they got enough return on investment where they can at least evaluate the market. And so now's the time where I see a lot of companies evaluating the market, even if it's less than that time frame, just because of the potential benefits that these newer, what they're calling next-gen systems can do with AI technology. And so, when you're looking at that, you want to identify areas where this technology can give you the greatest return on investment. We talked a lot about different areas where AI can be used, whether it's case intake, whether it's case processing, reporting, signaling, and you don't necessarily need to implement all of them all at the same time, right? So look at the areas where you feel you can get the greatest return on that investment in time, and potentially implement them in pieces so that you can get those advantages and get some of those benefits quicker than doing them all in one big bang. You also want to work at defining what are your models and algorithms, based on your data, your product portfolio, therapeutic areas, and so forth, right? A lot of these companies will come with algorithms out of the box, but that doesn't mean that they're going to work as well as the vendors expect with your data, right? So you need to really look at those models and work to get them to be as efficient and for you, right? Going back to that F1 score. Lastly, you want to identify a validation approach. It's slightly different than potentially what you'll need to do for just a standard, historical type of system, and you want to work with your team's validation organization to come up with the appropriate approach that you feel confident in and can be defended during an audit or so forth. And then lastly, you want to document a strategy to manage your algorithms. And what I mean by that is, when you go live with your system, you have your algorithms tweaked based on your current data. Over a period of time, and I can't tell you what that time is because there's just not enough data yet, but those algorithms will go what we call stale, right? Something that maybe before was getting F1 scores of a 0.85 or 0.86, potentially in 2 years, may all of a sudden start being a 0.7. And that could be due to, maybe new products that you marketed, maybe an acquisition that you had. Lots of different reasons why your algorithms could still be effective, but a little bit stale and may need to be tweaked and managed. And so you want to have a strategy and a plan in place for how you can make sure you manage those algorithms. So that's what I would leave you all with. I hope that you found this helpful and informative. And unless so there's nothing else that I have, and so I'll open up the floor to any questions from the panel.
Yeah, thank you, Alan. Appreciate that. I wanted to jump back in here and do a couple quick things. Number one, we'll go ahead and get that recording started.